unusual time spot here, live on a Sunday afternoon with none other for 20 minutes now, only 20 minutes. Conversations with Dustin Starr, and he's going to sit back and he's going to record a Patreon and a members only section of this. When we go off the air, guys, check your Patreon, check your members only, because we're going to have a bunch of other stuff up there. Dustin, there's a lot going on backstage that I hate to say this. I'm just going to say it. It's better behind the paywall. How's that? What do you think?
It's definitely good behind the paywall for sure, because we get to talk about stuff that I don't ever talk about, and there's reasons for that, obviously. But yeah, man, you line them up, let's knock them down.
Right on. I'm excited about it. Let's talk about, we got coming up in a couple weeks, and you promoted a lot of stuff this past Saturday or yesterday. You was promoting a lot of stuff, but let's talk about episode 200. Now, I know I'm getting kind of melodramatic here, but what is, and I was talking to Gun Show on 5 Minute Time Limit about what it means. What does still working, still doing stuff for Memphis Wrestling mean? What does episode 200 mean to you?
I mean, it's a milestone. That's why we call it milestone. The ego part of all of us, where, some of the older guys versus the newer guys and all that kind of stuff. The ego part of it is that we have more episodes and more longevity than any other rendition of Memphis Wrestling other than the USWA. And so that means Corey Macklin's Memphis Wrestling. That means Randy Hales' Power Pro Wrestling. That means all of Jerry Lawler's failed renditions of Memphis Wrestling, Jerry Lawler's Memphis Wrestling, and all that stuff, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, we've outlasted them. And I think another part of the ego thing is that we are doing what some of the others thought that we couldn't do. Now, for the audience part of it, they're just loving. They have no idea, what the classic guys think. They don't care. And so that's why I say that's the ego part, because we don't really care either. There's going to be people that like the show. There's going to be people that don't like the show. Most of the people that don't like the show are in the business and aren't on our show. So that tells you exactly why they don't like it. But it is absolutely a milestone, 200. And we've been doing them by 50. So every 50, we have a milestone, and it gives us an opportunity to build up to a big payoff, a big blow off to a huge match. And following the next couple of weeks of Memphis Wrestling, you'll see exactly that. We've got a loaded card, man. It is going to be something else.
Now, I'm excited about hearing, to see 200. Now, I know we're up to 800 and something episode. I think this is 895 of stspod.club. But I told this story last night. The idea was, when I reached out to you when you started this, to go on television doing your own product, I said, look, we're going to do 12 episodes of Rolling into Memphis, and we're going to review. We started looking for somebody to review it with me. Me and you did a couple of choices, decided on somebody, went with that for 100 episodes. It's kind of a milestone for me, not only 200 episodes of a podcast, but also this will be the 100th episode that I've done alone. Only lonely. So, and to think that I've been here this long is just, it's crazy. It's been fun, and it's been a fun ride, and it feels good. This recent summer, I got all kinds of heat. So because of my relationship with Memphis Wrestling,
but you really didn't.
I couldn't. They didn't want me. They didn't want me to pay for.
Who are they? Who are they? Tell the people who they are.
In my own hometown.
There's not many.
Okay, all right. So I'll just say, apparently Kevin Lawler has told everyone that Jerry Lawler hates me. And
can I say fuck him, or do I have to?
Yeah, go ahead. You can do it.
That's stupid. Yeah. That's the most ridiculous thing ever.
I had just seen Lawler in Evansville. We shook hands. We talked the whole 9 yards. And, I sometimes tell my wife, I know I'm not a big deal, but get this. If I was going to do a wrestling show in Jonesboro, Arkansas, the number one podcast in this area, we get so many. What would they do? What would you do, Dustin?
I would be booking that show with you, brother. You better be calling me to do that show. Look, man, those guys don't matter. One guy does not matter. It's very unfortunate that somebody with the last name Lawler actually sends DMs to our fans telling them not to come to the shows, picks up the phone and calls the talent, tells them not to come to the shows. It's actually like comical at this point. We're not going anywhere. You're not putting us out of business. If you want to do, I just don't understand what the thing is. Me and this guy were friends for 20 years until I launched my own business.
Me
When I
too.
launched my own business, they went against me. And I talked to Wolfie D on Wolfie D's podcast, In Living Color with Wolfie D. Go check it out. I highly recommend it because he was asking me questions from the perspective of the classic old school guys. He was asking me questions from the perspective of somebody like Kevin. And the fact of the matter is that we and I guess, have done something that he couldn't do with his wrestling company. It was a major failure. And I'm not saying that to talk shit. I'm saying that to say that he didn't even have one episode on television. He probably ran shows that you can count on two hands. Maybe you take one shoe off and you can count how many shows he does. I have no idea what they have a problem with, but I was posed with the question of why call it Memphis Wrestling? Because it is Memphis Wrestling. And I'll tell you the same thing that I said on Wolfie D's podcast, because I think it was really eye-opening for Wolfie. And somebody that's listening to this might be wondering the same thing. Look, we would still be working for the Lawlers. Had they not stopped doing Memphis Wrestling, we would still be working for Jerry Lawler. We loved it so much that when they quit, and when Lawler told me at Hitch Kitchen Table that Memphis Wrestling was dead and it wasn't coming back, we started our own. We loved it so much and we admired it so much and we looked up to it so much that we started our own. And here we are. We took a slang because USWA, CWA, Power Pro Wrestling, none of those were called Memphis Wrestling. We just called it Memphis Wrestling. Just like we call soda Coke. Hey, can you get me a Coke?
Yeah, the original Memphis Wrestling came on and it said Championship Wrestling. That's
Championship
all it
Wrestling. If you have a problem, have a problem with Championship Wrestling, because we did that for 100 episodes as well until we flipped. And now I've hosted 300 consecutive episodes of wrestling on Saturday morning television. Wow. 300 I have hosted, right? So we took a slang, Memphis Wrestling, and we turned it into a brand, and that's what we have today. What's the problem?
I know. I just
jealousy is the problem, and that's it. That's all there is professional jealousy or animosity or something because he or they didn't do it. But BT, trust me, there's no they. There's no they. The diehard wrestling fans that are watching, and we love them to death. They love us. They don't even know who some of those guys are. I'll use this as an example. And I love Robert Gibson. I love the Rock and Roll Express. When we tell the trainees to go watch a Rock and Roll Express show or match to learn, they're like, ooh, that's black and white. You know, like you're not going to hook that 19, 20-year-old with wrestling like that, even though they could learn a ton from it. We had Robert Gibson come in and he was signing autographs at the Mid-South Fair, and BT, again, not throwing shade, didn't know who he was. Our audience is too young. And
I said that. I talked to someone about that this past weekend. I was on.
I'm not hating.
No, it's true. Yes.
I'm just saying when we've got 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Now, don't get me wrong. Crazy Lewis in the front row, Miss Lois, Keith, me, you. We all know the old guys. We love the old guys and all that kind of stuff. But our audience, literally, I say, after our training session with Robert Gibson, how many of you guys have ever heard of Robert Gibson? Nobody raised their hand. He still did an awesome job training, but I'm just saying they're younger.
Right. I looked at that piece of just that small piece of video that you aired of Robert Gibson in that ring, and he was showing them some of the little bitty things that no one's ever show me. I didn't wrestle enough. I was managing, but it was just where you put your hands, where you put your hand when you go. That was just crazy. I was like, I said on the show, go out of your way to just watch that segment. Because if you're a new wrestler and you don't know how to do those things, then, it's time for you to learn kind of thing.
I also feel like that some of those guys like Robert and maybe Ricky too, I don't know, but like those guys that I've been friends with for 20 years and that I've worked with in multiple towns and on television, I think that they aren't close enough to our situation to understand what we're really doing until they get there. And when they get there and they go, whoa, it's almost like, how are you doing this? Like you guys built this? Like we didn't know this. And even the biggest hater will have to take a step back and go, wow, all right, this is nice. Like, why didn't we do this back in the day kind of thing? So I feel like that there's a lot of scuttlebutt before they get to us, but I do believe that there's a spot for everybody. I've been talking to Wolfie D. I've been talking to Doug Gilbert. Tommy Rich's name comes up, youngest NWA world champion of all time. I'd love to have him down here. Jimmy Hart, of course. We still want Lawler to come. We want Dundee to come. So anybody that's listening to this, we want all of the classic guys to come. We love them, man. We really do. I do know that our audience skews younger, but I know that if there is a way to bring in some of those old school guys like Handsome Jimmy Valiant, I can't even repeat the nice things that Handsome Jimmy Valiant said, because you guys would think that I'm a douche. You think that I'm making it up or that I'm tooting my own horn. He was so nice about the facility and what we're doing and everything. I truly believe that there will come a time where they will all make a pit stop in Memphis wrestling, just like they did. And that proverbial pass the torch and all that kind of stuff, to me, they're putting the stamp of approval on our product when they come in and not only work the show, but then enjoy it and talk good about it when they're done.
Awesome. I sometimes sit in with, and Richard Mulligan used to be a wrestler, Max Payne, and him and his buddy Josh and Gene do a USWA retro podcast, and it's in 1993. And when I was watching 1993, I thought about you, not particularly you, but something that you could talk on.
Real quick, yeah. 1993, my Maria was 3 years old. I'm just proving my point. That even the early 90s, our audience and our people are younger than Maria, but she was 3 at that time. So keep that in mind anyway, sorry.
Oh, no, it's all right. I understand. And I had talked about it on their Patreon version that the Memphis, that you had learned real early and real quick that your audience wasn't the old school guys. They weren't the old school fans. The old school fans are, a lot of the old school fans are gone because they just watch old stuff on YouTube and they don't care about the new stuff. So, but let me get this question, because I thought about you. He was one of your best friends in wrestling, and you probably have 100 stories about him, and probably most of them would have to be on Patreon. But I see Too Cool 2 there, and they're your boys, as LA Hustlers say. But Brian Christopher, tell me, if Brian Christopher was still alive, what would Dustin Starr be doing with Brian Christopher on Memphis Wrestling?
Oh, man, it would be too cruel. I'll tell you that, man. I really think that something like this, and people don't realize this, but me and Brian were close. We talked a lot. We texted a lot. Towards the end of his life, I think he was living with one of the boys and kind of just trying to, he didn't have his own place. He was just trying to connect the days together, is what it felt like. But me and Brian were tight. We played video games together. We shot fireworks on 4th of July together, at each other, at Jerry Lawler's car. We traveled to shows together. We went back and forth from TNA together. The night that he passed away, the night that he hung himself, I was there. Me and Maria were there. One of very few that were in the room talking to Brian Christopher and trying to just tell him to hang on, fight, and all that kind of stuff. So we were very close. We were there at the funeral. I didn't carry the casket, but I was allowed over there and, really close to the situation. And it's something that I'll never, ever forget as long as I lived. And by the way, Kevin was the one that called me and told me to go to the hospital that night. So me and Kevin were very tight with all of those guys. Man, I really think that this would have been something that brought me and Brian even closer together. It really would have, because he was so creative and had so many some of these ideas were crazy, but some of them would work. I hear some of these ideas and I'm like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Let's do it, because it's Memphis wrestling. But man, Brian Christopher would be doing the hip hop drop off the top rope. This dude would be rocking and rolling. This is so many similarities to the old classic Memphis wrestling. And even, Corey Macklin's Memphis wrestling, doing the desk promos and doing all that kind of stuff. He would have absolutely flourished on this. And depending on what kind of shape he was in and what condition he was in, man, he might have even got another look to go somewhere else, because we would have featured him so strong. And I don't care what anybody says, he would be here with us, because he would have told some of the other guys, just like Handsome Jimmy did, hey, sorry, pal, I'm going to work,
It was going back watching him, especially in 93, is the talent that this man was given, God-given talent, and understanding. after rewatching this, I was not watching Memphis Wrestling 93. I was doing something else. So this is some of the first stuff I'm able to see, for some of the old stuff I'm able to see for the first time. And it's just the things where he's building the match for heat, the actual psychology, the promos. He's so good on. He would have been
Oh,
such a good
a
promo
fired up
person.
promo from Brian at the desk. And look, I love doing the desk interviews. I've got to interview some of wrestling's biggest stars recently. Butterbean's coming up, Tony Atlas,
That was,
Tugboat,
yeah, Butterbean was yesterday, but yeah,
Booker
did a real
T. I
good.
mean,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
interviewed some of my favorite wrestlers of all time at that desk, and I felt like I've known them just because I watched them so long. Jimmy Blaylock, I've known 20 years. Psycho Simon, I've known probably longer than that. These guys, when I'm interviewing them at the desk, my heart's not even beating fast. I'm not even nervous. Like I'm in my element because I know these guys. I could only imagine cutting a promo and interviewing Brian Christopher, who's fired up. Fans, Grandmaster, next week, stay with us. You know, like, oh man, he would have just really brought that excitement. But yeah, Brian Christopher would be off the chain if he was here with us in Memphis Wrestling. And towards the end of his life, he was still in really good shape. He still
Oh,
looked
here's
great.
something.
He was
We talked
jacked.
about.
He was
Yep,
tanned.
yep. He looked good. The Jerry Lawler's version of Memphis Wrestling, was that the one that came on late and it had
It
Jimmy
was at a,
Blaylock always had a monster or something?
yeah, it was like at a bar or something.
Okay,
And
so get
that was one of the
this.
things King asked me at the kitchen table. Why are you calling it Memphis Wrestling? Why don't you call it Dustin Starr's Memphis Wrestling? Could you guys imagine if I called the show Dustin Starr's Memphis
Man,
Wrestling?
it would really be. But I want to tell you about Brian Christopher. So they would show an old clip of him in WWE. All right. I got all the ratings. I looked at the ratings. I had a friend at the TV station. The only thing on that Memphis Wrestling show that got ratings, not a Jerry Lawler match, not any of the top heels. It was always Brian Christopher, no matter what. He was just, and I was just, he was so popular at what he was doing. And you still have this Too Cool 2 that's still there that was part of Brian Christopher. So it would have
Yeah.
been interesting to see. I was just fantasy booking, but it would have been fun to see him being part of them and bringing them back out and doing whatever he could do with them. Is it important for you to have? And I know the answer, but is it important for you to have those people like Too Cool 2, who they even say this on the show this past week, LA Hustlers. You almost got hit, by the way.
Line of fire.
You almost got hit
Hell
for
of a pull
real.
apart.
For real.
I love the scene. I love the scene when there's a bunch of people in front of the desk and you've got, me or Cobra in the middle going, hey, come on, and it just looks like total chaos. And our camera operators are really
That
good
was
at
well done. That was well done. The camera angle and everything where y'all did that. But my question is it important to have the Simon, the Too Cool 2, the Derek King? These people were either your friends, influenced you in wrestling. All of them did probably.
Yeah.
Is it important to have those people with you on this ride?
Absolutely. Especially a guy like Simon who helps out behind the scenes so much. He would be angry if I told you all the stuff that he does help do because he is so kayfabe. He does not. He's like, dude, why'd you even bring my name up? That's kind of how he is. And then Derek King, just having him there. It's also you kind of build a support system around you. Like Derek King is very argumentative on a lot of stuff, but it's because he's not used to being wrong. He's not used to being wrong. So he's there for that. And then Too Cool 2, when they showed interest. And then, of course, Lance, Tim's son, is wrestling now. And so I looked at it like it was my duty to help Tim introduce his son to professional wrestling. And so Lance is doing shows around the area, getting ready to do television at some point. But absolutely, man, having those guys come in because they've seen what it was like before and they see what it's like now. And I hate to like harp on it and I sound like I'm complaining and stuff, but back then we didn't really know what being an extra in WWE was. We didn't really know that much about how to get to WWE. We knew that Jerry Lawler and some of the other guys were on the show, but we also knew that he wasn't going to help us out. And so now I feel like it's my job. My job is to make up time and try to introduce some of these Memphis performers to a larger audience. And obviously you've seen that started to come to fruition. And I think it's because we're like farmers. We plant something and we take care of it and we water it and we water it again, put some sunshine on it. And then eventually in a year and a half, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, all of a sudden it starts to blossom. And so when people are like, oh, that's a work that they're bringing these seminars in here. Oh, yeah. Well, by the time we did it the second time and we're about to do it the third time at some point in 2025, we've got a whole, if I were standing at our 11 o'clock meeting and said, everybody raise your hand if you've worked for WWE this year, most of them, the majority, over 50% would raise their hand. And that's something that had never happened before. And now for somebody to be signed, I think the proof is in the pudding at this point, right? We just got to keep our nose to the grindstone.
I felt like it was a stamp. I know AEW guys have showed up. You've had ex-WWE guys, Booker T's with WWE now. Yep. We've had all these guys, but with the ID, and I didn't text you, I didn't message you. I just sat and waited, because as soon as I started reading all the details about WWE, I said, we need somebody here. All right, guys, guess what? That was 20 minutes. Same bat time, same bat channel.
I've got all sorts of WWE details coming up.
That's right. Best little wrestling podcast in the business. Be there and stay with us for Patreon. If you're not in Patreon, you don't get what we're going to talk about next. WWEID, MKZ. I'm just teasing. Dustin, you know this. You know it, don't you? My mama's seen all 198 shows also. Love my mama.
Love her. Thank you, Mom.